Let's talk about some economic matters and something that's been bothering me. We're going to talk military matters. What is going on inside the military? All that, cheese balls, Peter Schiff, coming up on Unright. All right, before we begin our regularly scheduled program here on I'm Right, we want to do what we always do and honor the fallen on this show, especially those who die in training, peacetime. They never get talked about. Miguel A. Maya, United States Marine. He was part of the Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron 303. Died in training this week, Camp Pendleton, California. And say a prayer for him. Say a prayer for his family. They gave up their boy, and he gave up his life for this country. We salute him. Rest in peace, warrior semper fi. All right. Now, I want to talk about something that's been bothering me. Just let me pour my heart out here for a minute because, well, there was something this weekend. All right, so last week, you remember Wednesday, Thursday, I don't remember what day here on the show, we talked about an email we got to the show, got an email from a farmer. Because of inflation, because of everything, he can't make ends meet anymore. Now he's signing up for welfare, signing up for EBT. He felt terrible. He felt like a disgrace, felt like it was a disappointment. Remember, we talked about it. We read it on the show, all right? So that hit me hard. And I told you at the time it hit me hard. Then this weekend, we had to have we were hosting some big neighborhood party this weekend. I won't go into the details of it. It doesn't matter. It was just some little neighborhood event, some horseshoes, whatever. But we had to order the food for it. And so we had to get this food delivered to the house for it. And I'm out there to meet the delivery lady. Little old lady shows up, older car, car's older and beat up. Little old lady shows up. And because it was a decent size order, because it was a whole neighborhood, she got a decent tip, just percentage-wise, out of the whole deal. And she got a decent tip. It's fine. And she thanked me for it. And she said that tip that she had made, it was $60. She said it made her entire day. And you could tell when she was telling me it, that it changed her life. It changed her $60. Little old lady, so hard up for money. She's doing food deliveries on Saturday at 10 a.m. And $60 changed her entire life. And so what happened this weekend was by Sunday afternoon, I was in a funk. If I just want to put it that way, in a funk. Does that make sense? You ever get yourself in a funk? And my wife could tell. And she started asking me, what's bothering you? What's bothering you? What's bothering you? And I started thinking about it. It's eating me up. It's eating me up how badly Americans are suffering all around me right now. And I'm starting to let it get to me. And I know I need to not do that, but it's starting to get to me. I can't stand it. And then when I contrast that with how the politicians in this country are acting right now in Washington, D.C., Democrat and Republican, it just eats me so bad. Nobody cares about those people. No one talks about those people, Democrat or Republican. Very, very few. No Democrats and 5 Republicans talk about those people. The farmer going on EBT, the little old lady who's so smashed by inflation that she can't move. And I'm going to get upset, so I'm going to calm down. They never even talk about them. They never mention it at all. Do you remember last week we were talking about Ukraine and they just passed that big $60 billion bill to Ukraine? Do you remember when I came on here and I said this last week? You ready for this one? Write this one down, Mr. Producer. This won't be the last one. You know that? It won't be. There'll be another one and another one. And as long as you're writing something down, write this one down. Once Ukraine signs its peace agreement, once they lose, and they will, once they sign the peace agreement, and they will, once Russia takes the territory officially they wanted, and they will, the United States government is going to bloodsuck even more of your money right out of your wallet, and they're going to hand it to their friends at BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, these finance giants, to rebuild Ukraine. We'll spend more money rebuilding Ukraine than we're spending right now in the lost cause that is the war of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky, or Vladimir, depending on what article you read, gave a speech this weekend. On my life, I swear to you, I didn't know this was coming. Here it is. Would you like to hear it? Quote, "We are also working on fixing specific levels of support for this year and for the next 10 years, including armed support, financial, political, and joint arms production. The agreement should be truly exemplary and reflect the strength of American leadership." Farmers going on welfare. Little old ladies not sitting around playing bingo, bouncing her grandkids on her knee. She's killing herself on a Saturday, delivering food to people for $60 that can make her pay her bills, allow her to pay her bills that night. And this from Mitch McConnell. This is how much your government cares.
I'm going to be advocating increasing the defense budget, no matter who gets elected, and preparing ourselves for the long term, which is China, Russia, and Iran. This administration budget requests for defense haven't even kept up with inflation. I have some influence here in the Senate. I intend to use it, no matter who gets elected president, to increase our defense budget and get ready for the challenges that we have ahead of us.
Now, whatever you think about defense budgets, if you're that little old lady, you're that farmer on welfare, do you think that person's there working for you? And look, Mitch McConnell's bad enough. That's bad enough. The GOP's bad enough. I could have played you 1,000 clips of the GOP. The most important thing in the world is Ukraine. Blah, blah, blah. Oh my gosh, protests on Colombia. Blah, 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 blah. I could play for you all of that, but maybe the worst part is White House Correspondents' Dinner this weekend. President, all the people in the press got together. And right after the 60-year-old woman spent her whole Saturday working her fingers to the bone, just trying to get by, the President of the United States and all of his media friends got together and laughed at her.
Everything feels strange now. By a lot of measures, President Biden is having a very successful first term, but people don't seem to realize it. Like with the economy, the vibes are bad, but the numbers say it's strong. The economy is kind of like you on the steps of Air Force One. It feels like it's stumbling, but there is somehow upward progress.
Just making laughs. Having a good time in the economy. It's going well, but you fell. Isn't it funny? It's friggin' hilarious, isn't it? And that, look, when they're not laughing about the economy, they're going on television, having destroyed it, all these people, having destroyed it, they're going on television and taking no responsibility for it, just doing a bunch of finger pointing again. Does anyone even speak or care about Americans in this government?
Since President Biden came into office, food prices, for example, are up 21%, and the average hourly wages are down 2.5%. That's from January of 2021. So now we're seeing inflation go up again and GDP slowing. So is this the start of stagflation?
No. When you look at incomes are growing faster than inflation. And when you look at food costs, those have also stabilized. And what we know to be true is that input costs are coming down. And one of the things the president's called on companies to do is to pass those cost decrease down, pass those cost decrease to the American people. And I've seen that myself in terms of grocery shopping. I've stopped going to the grocery shop by my house and gone to the one by my church because there you've seen prices come down. And what he's saying is that the American people shouldn't have to go to different grocery stores. All the grocery stores should pass on the lower cost of input costs to American consumers.
You're out there delivering groceries on a Saturday and the administration's blaming the grocery stores. Or bragging that, what did he say? Wages have outpaced inflation. And I got to let it go. I'm telling you, not stop caring. That's not what I'm saying. I got to stop taking it home. I got to stop letting it eat at me because it's killing me right now. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. We have so much to talk about. Peter Schiff's going to join us next, talk about this economy, the economy that's degrading, crumbling, probably a good way to put it, but When's it stop? Does it stop? Let's ask Peter about that. Before we talk to Peter, speaking of money, you want to save some money on some amazing coffee and have it delivered to your house? Do you want to stop supporting? Have you ever looked into these big coffee companies where you buy all your coffee beans from in the store? Go look into them. Go look into what they think about you and your values. Look where they give their money. And then there's Blackout Coffee. Blackout Coffee, they have mugs, all American, baby. God, life, coffee, America. Blackout Coffee also saves you 20% off your first order when you go to blackoutcoffee.com/Jesse. Get yourself a couple mugs, choose your coffee. You can get this frou-frou little cinnamon stuff. It is really good. My kids love it. I like just the straight beans. Your call, all right? blackoutcoffee.com/Jesse. We'll be back.
I think we've got a good, strong economy. We've got very strong domestic demand. Consumers are holding up. Some low-income consumers are perhaps exhausting their buffers of saving that they built up during the pandemic. We're seeing a little bit more distress at the household level there. But generally, households are in very good financial shape. Our financial system is generally quite strong.
Man, that's great news. Now, I haven't actually heard that from many of the people I talk to in my normal life, but I guess households are doing good and everything's fine. So I don't even know why we're even bothering talking to Peter here. Maybe he has a different view of things. Joining me now, Peter Schiff, Chief Economist and Global Strategist at Euro Pacific Asset Management. Peter, maybe we should just hang up now. I had no idea things were going so well. I thought grocery prices were up 40% and the housing market is about to have a commercial real estate issue, to put it mildly, but maybe I was wrong.
Well, remember, Janet Yellen's job is not to tell the public the truth. It's, to lie. It's to make the public believe that the economy is in much better shape than it really is. Her job is to help reelect her boss. So that's why she's there. So, don't expect an honest assessment to come out of Janet Yellen. That's the last thing she's going to do. Right? She wasn't hired to be honest. She was hired to lie and put a positive spin on all the bad news. Right? She makes lemonade out of lemons, and we've got one hell of a lemon of an economy, and she's making a lot of lemonade.
Peter, how bad is it and how bad is it going to get? Obviously, we talked about the economic numbers came out last week. A lot of people using the S word, stagflation. Is that where we're at? Is it getting worse? What's happening?
The economy is bad, and unfortunately, it's going to get a lot worse. The numbers don't tell the whole story. Most of the numbers are going to be revised anyway, so they're not even accurate. But there are some statistics that really paint a bleak picture. You've got a situation where savings rates are near record lows, household debt record high, credit card debt record high. Why are households in so much debt? Because the cost of living has gone up 30 or 40% just since Biden's been president. And so they're struggling to pay the bills, so they have to go into debt. The other way they're struggling is by taking second and third jobs. The number of Americans who are now moonlighting is at an all-time record high. All the jobs that have been created during the Biden presidency have gone to people who already had jobs, pretty much. They're all part-time jobs, and people are working 2 and 3 jobs. And then Biden claims credit for these jobs. The voters are blaming him for these jobs. They don't want these jobs. They wanted one job. But unfortunately, one paycheck doesn't cut it anymore because inflation has destroyed its value. So the economy is, in fact, a disaster. The entire banking system is insolvent. It's just pretending to be solvent because of phony accounting. If they actually had a mark to market all the loans on their books, they'd all be broke, including all the too big to fail banks. The U.S. itself is insolvent. We're spending now $1.1 trillion a year on interest. That's more than we spend on national defense. By next year, we'll be spending $2 trillion a year on interest. That'll be more than either Social Security or Medicare. It'll be the single biggest line item in the government budget, and it's not going to stop there. It's going to keep on growing. We have $35 trillion almost in the national debt, and that's growing exponentially. So we're on the verge of a major sovereign debt and currency crisis. Yet, Janet Yellen, is putting lipstick on this pig and trying to sell it to the voters.
Peter, I was talking to somebody last week about the economy, and he was actually going through exactly what you just talked about. He had to get a second job. He was having a hard time paying the bills. And he was asking me, hey, are we going to come out of it? Or are we going to run into some big bubble popping thing? And what I tried to explain to him, and please correct me if I explain it wrong, is that you're in the middle of the bubble popping thing. That it's not going to be some event. As you watch your standard of living go down, it's just going to keep going down. Like, this is what it looks like. He's like, what's it look like? I said, congratulations, you're in the middle of it. Did I steer him wrong?
This is what it looks like now. It's going to look a lot worse as it proceeds to unfold. So we're in the crisis, but we're in the early stages of the crisis.
Okay, so when we hit things like $2 trillion in debt next year as just the interest on debt, just to service the debt, $2 trillion. Eventually, somebody is not going to get paid on our interest-only loan, whether that's China, Japan, whoever it may be. So what happens from there, Peter? How does it look when that conversation comes, because it's coming?
Yeah, well, you can already see that people are getting worried. They're moving out of dollars. That's why gold went over $2,400 an ounce. That's not a coincidence. There is a de-dollarization process that is starting. It's going to snowball. But as it really gets out of control, and when we start to see the dollar not just fall, domestically relative to prices or relative to gold, but when we finally see the dollar weakening against other sovereign fiat currencies like the euro, the pound, or even the yen, which has been under a lot of pressure, then you're going to see the inflation really start to accelerate. It's going to put much more upward pressure on long-term interest rates, and that's when it's really going to hit the fan. And that's when I think the government might end up with wage and price controls or some type of way to disguise the symptoms of inflation while, allowing the disease to get much worse. And then you end up with shortages, long lines, rationing, riots, who knows? But the economic landscape is going to get a lot darker, probably especially after the elections.
Why after the elections?
Well, I think they might be able to kick the can down the road between now and then. Now, maybe not. Maybe it'll blow up. But they're going to try to do whatever they can. But once there's an election, it's not as imminent. Like you have to do it, because right now it's like we got to get through this election. We can't let the voters know how bad it is before they get into the polls. Now, they may not be able to keep the wolves at bay that long. We'll see.
Yeah. All right, tell me about interest rates, Peter. They keep flirting that they're going to go back down. The inflation stabilized. Well, it hasn't stabilized. Okay, maybe they're not going down. I'm so tired of being lied to. They're not going down, are they?
Well, they should go a lot higher. They're still too low. That's the problem. We have too much debt. We have too much inflation in the pipeline. Rates should be a lot higher. The fact that they're still this low is part of the problem. Now, the Fed is pretending that they're restrictive and that they want to cut rates. Well, the reason they want to cut rates is not because inflation has been vanquished. It's because the government can't afford to pay the rate. It's because the private sector can't afford the rates. Everybody has so much debt now because the Federal Reserve kept interest rates so low for so long and allowed everybody to lever up with all this debt. Now they can't afford to service the debt, let alone repay it, if the Fed were to allow rates to go to a point that was actually high enough to bring inflation back down to 2%. They can't do it. So they're just lying and pretending that they've already done it. But the markets are going to see through this charade at some point, and then we're going to have the crisis, have a currency crisis and a sovereign debt crisis.
Peter, I love small businesses for a variety of reasons, but setting aside my affinity for them, we're losing them and they appear to be strained. Why does that matter to the average consumer, to the person who doesn't care about them? Why is that important?
Yeah, first of all the big businesses used to be small businesses, but they grew, right? And so that's, how they cultivate. They start out small and they get bigger. So if a lot of these small businesses are failing, it means fewer large businesses will be created. But the big burden that they have is inflation, regulations, other forms of taxation that are driving them out of business. And you have government, forcing up wages with big minimum wage hikes. Insurance rates are skyrocketing. A lot of crime is picking up because the police don't prosecute the criminals. So there's all sorts of costs that are putting tremendous pressure on small business owners. And I think, they're going out of business, and fewer people are starting businesses. And that just means not as many goods and services to buy and fewer jobs created in the process.
Peter, how does an open border affect the economy? Because a lot of people have a hard time making that connection. Obviously, big businesses want cheaper labor, especially in this economy. So that's a factor. At the same time, it adds a tremendous strain on the public dole. Illegal immigration, it hurts us, but how? Make that connection for people.
Well, it all depends on who's coming across, right? There's always going to be pluses and minuses in that. So to the extent that law-abiding people are coming through and they're working honest jobs and they're productive members of society, then we actually benefit from that. I mean, many of these immigrants take jobs that Americans don't want or aren't qualified to do. And so without them, prices would be even higher and goods would be in even shorter supply. So you've got that category. Then you've got other illegal immigrants who come across and commit crime, who come across and go on welfare or other forms of public assistance, and who are a net drain on society. And so the question is, which is the stronger force? The good people coming in and helping out, or the bad people coming in and running up our bill? And it's hard to say, but if we had a better immigration policy that made it easier for the good people to come in and much more difficult for the bad people to slip through, then that would be a win for everybody. But unfortunately, we don't have a sensible policy at our border. And so we have the chaos that we have now.
Yeah, to put it mildly. Peter, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, that was a little dark. It's not good. And speaking of not good, military's in some trouble again. Things look to be really not going well, degrading on us fast. Amber Smith wrote a book about that. We're going to talk to her about that in a moment. Before we get to that, let me talk to you about your feet. Your feet are different. My feet are different. Everyone has different feet. Your feet hurt at the end of the day. They're tired at the end of the day. You're sitting there rubbing them at the end of the day because you don't have shoes made for your feet. You have shoes made for everybody. That's what G-Defy is about. Every pair of shoes comes with custom orthotics. Orthotics for you, not for me, for you. So when you buy your first pair and at the end of the day, you take them off and you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, how do my feet feel so good? Well, that's why, all right? That's why. Go save a pile of money, gdefy.com, promo code Jesse. You want to have feet that feel great at the end of the day? You ready to keep walking at the end of the day? gdefy.com, code Jesse. We'll be back. I haven't let Afghanistan go. And I know we bring it up, every few weeks on the show we talk about it. I haven't let it go. And you should not let it go. And I cannot emphasize this enough, how much what we did in Afghanistan is helping further along the destruction of the American military. Guys are getting out because of it. Guys are choosing not to join because of it. GWAT veterans are talking their children out of joining because of it. It's really, really freaking bad. Things are bad inside the military, and Amber Smith knows about it. In fact, she wrote a book about it. Joining me now, Amber Smith, veteran, and now author of the book Unfit to Fight, which I would highly recommend. Amber, I know you know them because I know them. In fact, we know many of the same ones. I can't count how many GWAT veteran friends of mine are done. They're done, and their kids are done. Hey, Jesse, my sons aren't joining. My daughters aren't joining. They watched it, and they're sickened.
Yeah, and it's a demographic. The veteran demographic is something that the Pentagon has counted on for years to sort of be this family business. Like if you served in the military, your kids are so much more likely to serve in the military. But yeah, I realized that in the research for my book that veterans are done contributing. They've given enough and they're saying, I'm not giving up my kids to go deal with these horrific foreign policy disasters that are being made out of Washington, D.C. And I'm glad to hear that you are not giving up on Afghanistan and talking about it, because that's exactly what the Biden administration is counting on, is the American people to forget about what happened. And during the evacuation, we were all watching it unfold in real time and wondering what the administration is doing with actually flat out denying the reality of what was going on the ground. You had John Kirby, a White House national security spokesperson, from the podium talking about how proud the administration was of the evacuation and that they didn't even see the chaos. And so we're thinking, what is going on with how they are attempting to push this narrative? But if you look at the new report about the investigations weren't actually telling the whole truth and giving the big picture about what was happening in terms of it being a bigger, complex attacks than the picture that they initially painted for everyone. And it's because they're attempting to influence history. They want the evacuation from Afghanistan to not be remembered for it in its reality, but how the narrative that they painted from the White House podium. And it's working. As you see, there's very little media attention reporting this most recent report that talks about how the attack was likely much larger and more complex than they originally talked about, and that maybe working with the Taliban and handing over perimeter security of the airport to the Taliban wasn't the best idea and ended up with 13 Americans killed.
Amber, you and I have talked about this both on the air and privately, about the lack of accountability from a leadership, from a flag officer standpoint, meaning, World War II, anyone who knows anything about it, you look at a conflict like that, there's a general getting fired or resigning in disgrace every other week. There's an admiral getting fired. Guys getting court-martialed for not even really doing much wrong, just screwing something up. And after Afghanistan, 20 years of failure, the only guy that lost his job was a lieutenant colonel who called for accountability. Where's the honor in the Flag Officer Corps anymore? What happened to these people?
Where's the honor and where's the integrity? That's something that is preached. Yeah. It is preached all day long to anyone that serves in the military, is about integrity. And sadly, leadership starts at the top, right? We're seeing these flag officers testify on the Hill, and straight up, they don't even try to hide it anymore. They've got talking points, they've got their narrative, they know what their goal is. Their goal isn't to win a war, it's to get more funding to continue the war. So they go up on Capitol Hill, they tell them anything they want to hear, which is the exact opposite of reality. We saw this in Afghanistan, where they talked about how the Afghan army could stand on its own 2 feet. They didn't need the US military support. They were conducting the missions, which anybody that was there knows, is that the US military was leading every mission. They would grab some Afghan interpreter or different Afghan army soldier to come with them so they could call it an Afghan-led mission. So it's crazy that the Pentagon has spiraled this out of control in terms of leadership trying to circle the wagon, and it's only gotten worse. After Vietnam, you saw this sort of shift of leadership accountability, and they didn't want to have that sort of stain on the Department of Defense as a whole. So instead of holding specific leaders accountable, they are let's circle the wagons. Nobody's going to get in trouble. Maybe you'll get moved into a different job position, but we don't want to deal with what they view as a PR disaster. So culture in the military has only gotten worse, and you have these leaders who fail up and have all become yes men, and it has turned into this disastrous culture as it's immersed itself into foreign policy, and how the military plays a part in that. And it's, sadly, the soldier on the ground is the one who has to suffer the consequences of no accountability.
Amber, I'm really, really glad you wrote the book, Unfit to Fight, because I'm glad there are people out there sounding the alarm about how bad the rot is, because people don't understand how bad the rot is, because we're not in some major war right now. Frankly, we're not in any real war right now. But the rot the normal person doesn't see now is going to rise to the surface real fast when things get kinetic here at some point, and they always do. It's going to get really bad when we get tested under fire.
It is, and we're already seeing the effects of it. We are seeing a recruitment crisis that we have not seen since the all-volunteer force after the Vietnam War. Even worse is the retention crisis. You're seeing officers who are turning down battalion command at the lieutenant colonel level, and people who are just, riding out their time till they can finish up their contracts and get out of the military. The morale inside the military right now, we talk to military people every day, and it is the stories that you hear is just that it continues to get worse. The COVID vaccine mandates that kicked out over 8,000 service members who wanted to be there, who wanted to serve in the military and serve their country, and were probably the leaders that the military needs right now. And instead, the military kicked them out. You see the diversity, equity, and inclusion being the priority as it exists today. Instead of being mission focused, you see standards being lowered so they can meet these quotas or targets or goals that they want to make a more diverse military. And in doing so, it's pushing this focus on uniqueness and individuality of the military instead of cohesion and trust and building the team, which we all know is absolutely necessary to have a successful military. And all of that combined has created a weaker military. And like you said, World War III is knocking on our doorstep. Pretty much it seems like something new every other week. We need a strong military right now, and instead we have them focusing on all of these distractions that is taking away from accomplishing the mission and training that prepares us to be able to be successful with that mission.
Amber, how do we fix it? Because I want to fix it. I know you want to fix it, obviously. You served, you fought. We want this fixed. How do we fix it?
Yeah, so many people view a critique of military leadership as somehow saying that the entire military is bad. And I say, as a service member myself, 2 wars, military family for generations, if you care about the military, you will want to fix it. And that means coming face to face with the very hard truths of what I talk about in my book, In Unfit to Fight. In order to fix it, it is going to take a new administration and a president that wants to fix it. It will be making drastic changes in terms of turning the military back into a meritocracy where people, rise up in the ranks because they're the best for the job, and not one that wants to push equity over opportunity. And so that is sort of step number 1. Step 2, kind of something we already hit on, was accountability. There is a 2-tiered justice system in the military right now, and there are double standards, and the lowest level people serving see it. They see exactly what just happened with Secretary Austin when he went AWOL for a week and he did not tell his deputy that he was going under the knife, he was going under anesthesia. Who was in control of our military right then? No one. That's the answer, is that no one was in charge of our military while Secretary Austin was having surgery. The fact that that failure of leadership and his ability to make a decision is absolutely crazy that he was allowed to stay in that position. But it just goes to show you there is no accountability. If a private would have gone, off post, had cancer treatment and not told his commander, he would likely be charged with some sort of crime under UCMJ. And Secretary Austin, all he did was go up on the Hill and smirk and talk about yeah, probably shouldn't have done that. But that's about as far as it goes.
Amber, all we can do is laugh. Where can people pick up your book, please?
Anywhere books are sold, Amazon. You can head to my website, officialambersmith.com, and Unfit to Fight, How Woke Policies Are Destroying Our Military.
Unfit to Fight. Go pick it up. Amber, thank you so much. All right. Someone's running for office, trying to run all this filth out of the D.C. Let's talk to him next. See what this guy's all about. Before we talk to him, let's talk about this. Neighbors. Wife and I went out with the neighbors this weekend. Just dinner, chicken wings, watching a game. And their daughter's off at college. Daughter gets in her car, backs out of her dorm parking lot, and she's backing out. Man comes running up to her driver's side window, knocking on the window. Hey, roll it down, roll it down. By the grace of God, she did not. Pulled away. Cops tracked the guy down later. He'd snuck into the dorm looking to do bad things. Do you have a burn-a pistol launcher? And maybe more importantly, does that daughter you sent away, does she have a burn-up pistol launcher? Does your son have a burn-up pistol launcher? Look, even if they don't like guns, this is non-lethal, right? I carry lethal and non-lethal. I always have. A burn-up pistol launcher shoots these pepper balls or tear gas balls. It is a necessity. Your mom needs one. Your daughter needs one. It is a dangerous world out there, all right? byrna.com/Jesse. In case you're wondering, yes, she does have her burn-up pistol launcher now. Byrna.com/Jesse. We'll be back.
There's nobody more at fault for the condition of this country than red state GOP voters. The reddest states in this country give us the most putrid Republicans at the federal level. Susan Collins is understandable, Tucker. Sorry to get all fired up. It's understandable. She's from Maine. It's from a blue state. Of course, we're going to get some wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed dork from that kind of state. From the Dakotas? The Dakotas are so red, it's crazy. They could have somebody to the right of me if they wanted to, but they don't. Well, I saw him on Fox last night. Oh, just gag me with a fork.
Well, apparently Rick was watching when I was doing that whole thing. He got all fired up about it, understandably. Rick Becker joins us now. I have a lot of respect for this guy. Candidate for North Dakota's at-large congressional district. You want to change D.C., this is how. And again, it's friggin' North Dakota. It's a former North Dakota state rep. It's not like he doesn't have a record. I love the Dakotas. I used to go pheasant hunting there all the time when I was a kid. Joining me now, Rick Becker. Rick, I'll never get it. And I don't mean to toss bombs at North Dakota, my own state, Texas. We have losers like John Cornyn. It's Wyoming. Wyoming's Republican Party sucks. Nebraska, Louisiana. Why?
Well, Jesse, thanks for having me on. So here's the thing. I think it's not so much about the voter, but it's about the party apparatus. So when you have a conservative state and they're electing more and more Republicans, they get to a point where if someone has a desire to have an elected position, right, if they're aspiring to have that, they know they must have an R behind their name or they're not going to get elected. So you have people then that don't have the conservative principles, but they have the spots. And so the way I see it is the more the greater the margin that the Republicans have in the legislature, in the elected officials, the more likely they are going to send a moderate squish to DC. And the reason for that is because you've got this paradox that when you have all of these moderates, when people are getting elected without conservative principles, you've then diluted the party to not have the principles it's supposed to have. They're more interested in protecting the club they're in, this party. Principle is far less important. The party then it's incumbent upon the party to send the people that represent the party, the moderate squish. And so here we are as grassroots principled conservatives fighting against the uniparty, against the big spending, big government rhino Republicans.
Rick, I need you to explain it to me as a former state rep and now somebody running as the at-large candidate, because I went through this when I ran for Congress too. Why is it that GOP leadership, whether you're in a state party or the national party, leadership moves to the middle? And I understand what you're saying about how a red state can get more moderate, I do, but why is it just automatically built in that the further you go up to the top, the more towards the middle you go? How is there nobody up there where you are? Yeah. How?
Well, it's a fight. It's a never-ending fight. It's been going on for decades. The way I see it is that these leaders, they think that they're supposed to encompass everyone who's within the party. They put the party above principle. They need to focus not on just the number of seats with an R. They need to focus on forwarding fiscal policy that represents the platform, the principles of the Republican Party. They're not doing that. They're trying to be big tent. They're trying to play happy to everyone. And what they should be focused on is principle. And so, yes, we as conservatives in the Republican Party are disappointed and let down time and time and time again.
Rick, tell me about your race. Tell me about why you're running. What are your hot button issues? Tell people about yourself.
Yeah. Well, my race, this race for the House in North Dakota it's a perfect example of what you're talking about, Jesse. So I'm a plastic surgeon, a businessman. I was in the state legislature for 10 years as a grassroots conservative. I started North Dakota's version of the Freedom Caucus, called it the Bastiat Caucus, was able to introduce and pass significant, important legislation like constitutional carry, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, confidential informant reform, civil asset forfeiture reform requiring search warrants for drone surveillance, requiring state agencies to include the ramifications of taking federal money. Huge, huge things. It's this type of track record for how I was able to get the endorsements of Senator Rand Paul, Representative Thomas Massey, Representative Bob Good, Vivek Ramaswamy, at least 8, 10, 12 members of the House Freedom Caucus. Now, you contrast that to the primary opponent I have, who is a career politician in the sense that she was a political staffer and then a lobbyist, and then she was appointed as a public utilities regulator, someone who actually in North Dakota is a proponent of renewables, despite the fact that we are reliant on fossil fuel. And she was selected by Mitt Romney to run his campaign in North Dakota. Here's where the war is. This is the fight. You've got a solid, grassroots, principled conservative against the uniparty rhino machine. I ask, Jesse, what do you think? This is exactly the race. Who do you think is going to represent North Dakota the best?
Backed by Rand Paul, Bob Good, and Thomas Massey should be about enough. That should be about enough for everybody. Those are about the only 3 politicians we even allow on this show. Real quick, Rick, give out your website so people can support you, please.
Yes, Rick Becker 2024, rickbecker2024.com. Please take a look. I'd love the support. We got to get more fighters to DC if we're going to save this country, Jesse.
rickbecker2024.com. Just so everybody knows, thank you, Rick, I appreciate it. Just so everybody knows, that race, that primary, is significantly more important than the general election in November. You know that, right? The primaries we sit out are way more important than the general elections we all show up to. That's a fact. All right, whatever. Lighten the mood. Next. All right. It is time to lighten the mood. And at a time where all the news is bad, isn't it? Well, I shouldn't say all that, but most of the news is bad. You look around and there's famine and disease, and there's wars, and spending, and the borders open, and oh my gosh, the sky is falling. But you should remember something. You should remember that the heroes, they didn't just live in the past, right? We look back at World War II and we say things like, my goodness, where are the men like that today? You know, have you ever said something or heard somebody say something like that? You kidding me? There are plenty of heroes out there today. Plenty of men who will go above and beyond. Plenty of men who will do things normal men, mortal men could never hope to do. Like this legend.
Eat those balls! Eat those balls! Eat those balls! Eat those balls!
Respect, sir. I'll see you tomorrow.